I should have been jealous that night. I should have been angry. Any other husband would have been. But I wasn't. I was sitting there, drink in hand, watching my wife laugh at another man's joke like she was 17 again, and all I could think about was how much I wanted to see what would happen if I let it go further. That's the truth I've never admitted out loud. The story I'm about to tell you isn't one I can attach my name to. It's not the kind of thing you can just walk into a bar and brag about, even though part of me still burns with the memory. I stay anonymous for a reason, because what happened between me, my wife, and my so-called friend was planned. It wasn't some accident. It wasn't betrayal. It was me. Before I go on, let me pause here and say this: if you're listening right now, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this story. It helps keep these confessions alive, and trust me, you'll want to hear where this is going. Alright. Let's start at the beginning. I met him years back. Let's call him Eric. Eric was one of those guys women noticed. Not because he was ridiculously handsome, though he wasn't bad looking, but because he carried himself with this easy charm. The kind of man who never had to try too hard. He was younger than me, worked out often, and had that boldness younger men sometimes wear like armor. He came into my life through work. At first, we were just colleagues, then casual friends. He'd come over sometimes, beers in hand, and he always found a way to make everyone laugh. My wife liked him from the start. She liked that he was fun, unfiltered, and nothing like the usual buttoned-up men we knew from my office. And that should have been fine. It should have ended there. But I started noticing little things. The way Eric's eyes lingered on her when he thought I wasn't watching. The way his compliments were always just a shade too personal. The way my wife, let's call her Claire, would blush, laugh nervously, or tuck her hair behind her ear in that way she always did when she felt seen. It was subtle. Innocent enough to ignore. But I didn't ignore it. I watched. There's something you need to understand about me: I've never been the jealous type. Most men say that and it isn't true, but with me, it is. My mind works differently. Instead of feeling threatened, I found myself curious. There was a charge in the air when Eric was around her. Attention. And while another husband would have told him to back off, I sat quietly, letting it unfold. That curiosity grew into something darker. One evening, we invited Eric over for dinner. Claire cooked one of her favorites, chicken parmesan with too much cheese, and we opened a bottle of red wine. The three of us sat at the table, and I could feel it happening again. Eric kept making her laugh. Not polite, hostess laughter. The real kind. The kind where she'd touch his arm without realizing it. The kind where her eyes shone brighter. And I sat there, chewing slowly, my heart pounding, not from jealousy but from this strange, forbidden excitement I couldn't shake. At one point, Claire excused herself to the kitchen to grab dessert. Eric leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said, "Man, you've got the perfect wife." "You know that?" He said it lightly, but there was weight behind it. I smiled. I know. Most men would have ended it there. But I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice, and asked, "You like her, don't you?" He froze for half a second. Then he laughed it off. "Come on, don't mess with me." But his eyes gave him away. That was the first time I admitted to myself that I wanted this to happen. The days that followed only fed the fire. Eric texted more often. He'd send memes, casual jokes, things I knew were meant for both of us but had an undertone that only I caught. Claire would read them, laugh, sometimes roll her eyes, but she never seemed bothered. And I started setting things up without even realizing it. I invited Eric to help me with projects around the house, knowing Claire would be there, bringing out iced tea, chatting with us. I'd watch her brush dust from his shoulder, watch him glance at her legs when she bent down. I became the quiet observer, feeding the tension without a word. One Saturday, Claire and I hosted a barbecue. Friends came, neighbors showed up, and of course, Eric was there. Music played, people drank, and at some point, Claire pulled Eric into a game of cornhole. The way they moved together, the way she laughed when he teased her for missing the board. I stood by the grill, flipping burgers, my chest tight, my thoughts dark. Not angry. Never angry. Just fascinated. Later that night, after everyone left, I asked Claire if she liked him. She frowned, half offended. "He's your friend." "That's not what I asked." She gave me a long look, then shook her head. "You're ridiculous." But the way her cheeks flushed told me everything I needed to know. That was when the plan began to take shape in my head. I couldn't stop picturing it. Not just Eric wanting her. Not just Claire feeling that rush of being wanted. But me, controlling it, watching it, letting it happen because I said so. It wasn't betrayal if I allowed it. It wasn't cheating if I orchestrated it. That's what I told myself. And the more I thought about it, the more certain I became I wasn't going to stop it. I was going to make it happen. That night, lying in bed beside Claire, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself. He's into her. And I'm going to let him have her. It's a dangerous thing, holding a thought like that inside your head. Once I whispered those words to myself, I'm going to let him have her, everything I did after was deliberate. Planned. Even the small things. It started with subtle changes. I invited Eric over more often. At first, Claire didn't think much of it. She liked having company, and Eric had always been fun to be around. But the more he came, the more I noticed her mood shifting. She would dress a little nicer on those nights, subtle things like slipping into jeans that hugged her curves better, or wearing a top that showed just enough collarbone to draw the eye. When I mentioned it once, she brushed me off. "Don't be ridiculous," she said with a laugh. But her cheeks told me I wasn't imagining it. One evening, I made it easy for the tension to surface. We were in the living room after dinner. I had poured everyone a drink, soft music played in the background, and the three of us sat together. The conversation was light. Work, weekend plans, random jokes. But every so often, I noticed Eric's eyes drifting to her legs when she crossed them, or to her lips when she laughed. I leaned back, pretending to be lost in thought, and then I threw the first stone. "Claire," I said casually, "you know Eric thinks you're attractive, right?" Her head snapped toward me, eyes wide. "What?" Eric choked on his drink. "Man, come on." I just smirked, swirling the liquor in my glass. "Don't act like you don't. I've seen the way you look at her." The room went still. For a second, I thought maybe I'd pushed too hard. But then Claire let out this nervous laugh, shaking her head. "You're unbelievable." Eric cleared his throat, cheeks flushed. "I mean, she is beautiful. But come on, I respect you." I shrugged like it didn't matter. But inside, I was watching every flicker of their faces. Claire's shock, Eric's embarrassment, and underneath it all, something else. Something alive. I'd planted the seed. The following weeks, I watered it carefully. I'd make playful comments at home when it was just me and Claire. "You know he looks at you, right?" "I can see it." She'd roll her eyes. "You're crazy." But then she'd go quiet for a moment, like the thought lingered even if she pretended it didn't. Another time, I said, "If you ever wanted him, I wouldn't stop you." That time, she looked at me like I had lost my mind. "You're insane." "Maybe." I grinned. "But I'm serious." She refused to believe me then. But I knew it was getting into her head. There's something powerful about suggestion. Once the thought takes root, it grows on its own. One night, we went out for drinks at a small bar in town. The kind of place with neon lights, sticky floors, and a jukebox in the corner. Claire wore a black dress that hugged her in ways that made it impossible not to stare. Eric was already at the bar when we arrived. The way his eyes widened when he saw her, that told me everything. We had a few rounds. Played pool, laughed more than we should have. At one point, leaned over the table, lining up a shot, and Eric stood behind her, offering advice on her form. His hand brushed her arm, lingered just a second too long. She looked at me, almost guilty. I just smiled, sipping my beer. That smile was permission, though she didn't know it yet. On the drive home that night, Claire turned to me. "What was that?" "What?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the road. "You know what? You didn't say a word when he was all over me at the pool table." I chuckled. "He wasn't all over you. He was teaching you a shot." "You're ridiculous." But her voice wavered. I glanced at her. "Did you like it?" Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. She just turned her face to the window, hiding the small smile she couldn't quite suppress. That was when I knew the idea was working. The real turning point came a week later. Eric was over again, helping me fix a loose cabinet in the kitchen. Claire moved around us, putting away groceries, humming to herself. At some point, I, accidentally, left the room to grab something from the garage. I was gone maybe 5 minutes. When I came back, they were standing close, closer than they should have been. Nothing inappropriate, nothing obvious. But there was a tension in the air, a spark I could feel even before I stepped inside. Neither of them said anything when I walked back in, but I saw the way they shifted apart quickly. That night in bed, I finally said it outright. "You want him, don't you?" Claire froze. "What?" "No." I turned toward her, watching her face in the dim light. "You don't have to lie to me. I can see it." Her voice trembled. "Even if I did, what kind of husband says that?" "The kind who wants to give you what you secretly want," I said. She stared at me like she couldn't decide if I was joking or serious. But deep down, I knew she believed me. We had a few rounds, played pool, laughed more than we should have. At one point, leaned over the table, lining up a shot, and Eric stood behind her, offering advice on her form. His hand brushed her arm, lingered just a second too long. She looked at me, almost guilty. I just smiled, sipping my beer. That smile was permission, though she didn't know it yet. On the drive home that night, Claire turned to me. "What was that?" "What?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the road. "You know what? You didn't say a word when he was all over me at the pool table." I chuckled. "He wasn't all over you. He was teaching you a shot. You're ridiculous. But her voice wavered. I glanced at her. Did you like it? Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. She just turned her face to the window, hiding the small smile she couldn't quite suppress. That was when I knew the idea was working. The real turning point came a week later. Eric was over again, helping me fix a loose cabinet in the kitchen. Claire moved around us, putting away groceries, humming to herself. At some point, I accidentally left the room to grab something from the garage. I was gone maybe 5 minutes. When I came back, they were standing closer than they should have been. Nothing inappropriate, nothing obvious. But there was a tension in the air, a spark I could feel even before I stepped inside. Neither of them said anything when I walked back in, but I saw the way they shifted apart quickly. That night in bed, I finally said it outright. You want him, don't you? Claire froze. What? No. I turned toward her, watching her face in the dim light. You don't have to lie to me. I can see it. Her voice trembled. Even if I did, what kind of husband says that? The kind who wants to give you what you secretly want, I said. She stared at me like she couldn't decide if I was joking or serious. But deep down, I knew she believed me. From then on, everything I did was about making the fantasy feel possible. I'd bring Eric into conversations even when he wasn't around. I'd tell Claire, he'd probably love the way you cook this, or Eric couldn't stop laughing at what you said the other night. Every mention was a reminder. One Saturday, the three of us were watching a movie. The lights were dim, the air thick with the smell of popcorn. Halfway through, I got up, pretending to be tired. I'll be back, I said, heading to the kitchen. When I returned quietly, I saw it, Eric leaning in just slightly, Claire frozen but not pulling away. They hadn't kissed, but they were on the edge of it. I cleared my throat, and they jumped apart like guilty teenagers. I didn't scold them. I didn't get angry. I just sat back down, a smirk tugging at my lips. Because that was all I proof that they were both already halfway there. The night ended like any other. Eric left, Claire cleaned up, and we went to bed. But I could feel her body tense beside mine. Finally, in the dark, she whispered, "You really wouldn't care if something happened." I turned toward her, brushing her hair back. Not if I wanted it to. Her breathing quickened. You're serious, aren't you? Completely. She didn't say anything else. But the silence between us was louder than words. Because now she knew. And once she knew, there was no taking it back. That was the night I realized the plan was no longer just in my head. It was real. It was moving. And there was no turning back. There's a difference between a thought that excites you in secret and a decision that changes everything. Up until then, my plan had been a whisper. A game of hints, suggestions, and stolen moments where nothing really happened. But the night I decided to say the words out loud, the night I gave her permission, was the night fantasy became reality. It started simple. We were sitting in the living room, the glow of a single lamp lighting the space. Claire was curled up on the couch in her favorite sweater, legs tucked beneath her, sipping a glass of wine. I had been quiet for most of the evening, my mind racing. Finally, she looked at me. You've been strange lately. Ever since Eric started coming around more. I chuckled, swirling the drink in my hand. Strange how? She tilted her head. Like you're watching something I can't see. Like you're waiting for something to happen. She wasn't wrong. I set my glass down, leaned forward, and said, I've been thinking a lot about you and him. Her eyes widened. Don't start. I'm not accusing you, I said calmly. I'm admitting something. I know he wants you. And I know part of you likes it. She shook her head, her face flushing. That's crazy. Is it? I leaned back. I've seen the way you light up when he's around. The way you smile. The way you blush when he compliments you. Don't tell me you don't feel it, because I won't believe you. Her lips parted, but no words came out. That silence was all I needed. I took a breath, steadying my voice. I want you to stop pretending. And I want you to know, if you wanted him, if you wanted to feel what it's like with him, I wouldn't stop you. Her glass nearly slipped from her hand. What? You heard me. She stared at me as though I had grown another head. You're my husband. And I'm telling you, I'd allow it. Because it's not betrayal if I want it to. Her face shifted between shock, disbelief, and something else. Something she didn't want me to see but couldn't quite hide, curiosity. Why would you even say that? She whispered. Because I want to see you alive like that. I want to see you free. And because I know you want him even if you won't admit it out loud. Her hands trembled as she set down her glass. This is insane. Maybe. But it's real. And you know it. The conversation ended there that night, but I could feel the weight of it between us. She didn't dismiss me the way she had before. She didn't laugh it off. She didn't call me ridiculous. She went to bed quiet, thoughtful, her body tense under the sheets. I lay beside her, my heart pounding, knowing I had just tipped us past the point of no return. The next few days were different. She avoided the subject, but her behavior gave her away. She was distracted, lost in thought, sometimes staring out the window longer than usual. When Eric's name came up, her cheeks flushed the way they used to when we first started dating. Back when a simple kiss could make her glow. It was working. The seed I had planted was blooming. I decided it was time to push further. The following Friday, I invited Eric over for drinks. Claire was surprised but didn't argue. She even changed into a soft blue dress, casual but flattering, like she wanted to look good without looking like she tried too hard. The three of us sat in the living room, the conversation easy at first. But as the night went on and the drinks loosened our tongues, I guided the topic toward relationships, attraction, and boundaries. At one point, I looked directly at Eric and said, "Tell me something. If you had the chance, would you ever make a move on Claire?" He froze, eyes darting to her, then to me. "Man, don't joke like that." "I'm not joking," I said, my voice steady. Claire's face turned red. "Stop it." But I didn't. I leaned forward. "Be honest. I've seen the way you look at her." Eric swallowed hard, running a hand through his hair. "She's beautiful. Any man would notice that. But you're my friend." "I'd never." "You don't have to finish," I interrupted, leaning back with a smile. "I already know." The room fell silent. Claire shot me a glare that said we'd be talking about this later. But I could see the truth burning in Eric's eyes. He wanted her. Badly. And now, he knew I knew. After he left that night, Claire turned on me the second the door closed. "What the hell was that?" I shrugged. "The truth. You embarrassed him." "No," I said calmly. "I gave him permission to admit what he's been hiding. And I gave you permission to stop pretending you don't notice." She stared at me, her breathing unsteady. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I want it to happen." Her eyes widened again. "You can't be serious." I've never been more serious in my life. For days afterward, she barely spoke to me. But I wasn't worried. I knew the thought was inside her now, impossible to shake. One evening, while she was cooking dinner, she finally broke the silence. "If I ever did, if something ever happened, you'd really be okay with it." I walked up behind her, sliding my hands around her waist. "More than okay. I'd want it. I'd want to see it." She stiffened in my arms, her breath catching. "You're insane." "Maybe," I whispered against her ear. "But you're curious." She didn't answer. But the way she leaned back into me told me I was right. The night of decision came sooner than I thought. It was a Saturday. Eric had stopped by to drop something off, but I invited him to stay for a drink. Claire looked nervous, almost flustered, as though she knew something was different about tonight. We sat in the living room again, talking casually, but I couldn't ignore the undercurrent of tension. Every laugh, every glance, every brush of a hand seemed charged. At one point, I stood, stretched, and said, "I'll be right back," heading to the kitchen. I left them alone on purpose. When I returned, I stopped in the doorway, watching. Eric was leaning closer than usual, his voice low, his hand resting just inches from hers on the couch. She wasn't pulling away. The sight sent a rush through me. I cleared my throat, and they both jumped, straightening like guilty kids. "Everything all right?" I asked casually. Claire's cheeks were flushed. Eric looked like he wanted to disappear. That's when I said it. Out loud. "No more games." "It's okay," I told them both. "If you want her, Eric, you can have her. And if you want him, Claire, I'm giving you permission." The silence that followed was heavy. Eric stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Claire's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no sound came out. Finally, she whispered, "You're serious." "Dead serious." Her hands trembled as she looked between us. "I don't know if I can." "You can," I said firmly. "Because I want it. Because I've planned this. And because deep down, you've wanted it too." Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of confusion, shock, maybe even relief. Eric ran a hand over his face. "Man. I don't know what to say." "Say yes." I told him. Because I already have. That night didn't end with anything more than words, but words were enough. Because the moment I gave her permission, the line we had never crossed before was erased. The door was open now. And once it was open, there was no closing it again. There's a moment in every plan when fantasy becomes reality, when the "what if" stops being a question and starts being the answer. For weeks I had been planting the idea, dropping hints, feeding curiosity. I'd pushed them closer, little by little, until there was no mistaking what was happening. But until that night, it had all been suggestion, temptation hanging in the air like smoke. That night, I opened the door wide and let the fire in. It was a Friday. The air outside was cool, autumn creeping into the evenings. Claire had spent the day restless, moving around the house like she had too much on her mind. When I asked her what was wrong, she shook her head and said, nothing, but her voice betrayed her. By the time Eric arrived, carrying a six-pack in his usual grin, I already knew something was different. He was nervous too. I could see it in the way he shifted on his feet, the way his laugh came out just a little too forced. We sat in the living room again, the three of us, drinks in hand. Music playing softly from the stereo. At first, the conversation was normal. Safe. But the tension underneath was anything but. I decided not to wait. I set my glass down, leaned forward, and said, let's stop pretending. You both know what I want. The room went silent. Eric blinked. Claire stared at me, her cheeks already red. You said it before, she whispered. But I didn't think you meant it. I meant every word. My voice was calm, steady. Eric wants you. You feel it. And I've given you permission. Eric swallowed hard, glancing between us. Man, this doesn't feel real. It's real, I said. Because I planned it to be. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air was heavy, thick with nerves and something sharper, desire, fear, anticipation. Claire set her glass down with trembling fingers. I don't know if I can. You can, I said gently. Because I'm here. Because I want it. Because you've thought about it, even if you won't admit it out loud. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of sheer intensity. She looked at me like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for me to either pull her back or push her forward. And I pushed. Do it, I whispered. For me. What happened next wasn't rushed. It wasn't reckless. It was slow, careful, heavy with meaning. Eric moved closer first, his hands shaking. Claire sat frozen, her chest rising and falling fast. I watched every second, my heart pounding, not from jealousy but from the thrill of seeing my plan unfold. When his hand brushed hers, she flinched, but she didn't pull away. She looked at me instead. My nod was all the permission she needed. Their hands intertwined. That simple touch carried more weight than anything else that had come before it. It was the first time she let herself cross the line, and the first time he dared to meet her halfway. I sat there, silent, drinking in the moment. The night stretched on like that, hesitant touches, stolen glances, both of them testing the boundaries I had erased. Every move they made, they looked at me, waiting for me to stop it. But I didn't. I wanted it. The strangest thing was how in control I felt. Most men would think of it as losing their wife, losing power. But for me, it was the opposite. I was the one directing the scene. Nothing happened without my approval. I was the architect, the conductor, the one holding the reins. And that made it intoxicating. At some point, excused herself to the kitchen. I followed her, finding her standing against the counter, her breathing ragged, her hands gripping the edge like she needed it to steady herself. You're shaking, I whispered, stepping close. She looked at me with wide eyes. How are you so calm? Because this is exactly what I wanted, I said. And because I love seeing you like this. Her lips trembled. I feel wrong. But I feel alive too. I touched her cheek, tilting her chin up. Then stop fighting it. Let yourself feel it. I'll catch you if you fall. Her eyes softened. And she nodded slowly. We went back to the living room, and this time, she didn't hesitate. She sat closer to Eric, her shoulder brushing his. When he reached for her hand again, she didn't pull away. And when he leaned in, slowly, carefully, their lips finally met. The kiss was tentative at first, almost shy. But then it deepened, and the room filled with a heat I had never felt before. I didn't stop them. I didn't even move. I sat there, my pulse racing, watching the woman I loved surrender to the moment I had created. It was the most intense thing I had ever witnessed. What followed blurred the line between love, desire, and surrender. I won't give you every detail, you can imagine that on your own. But I will say this, nothing about it felt like betrayal. Not to me. Not that night. Because it wasn't stolen. It was given. By me. And that made all the difference. When it was over, the three of us sat in silence. Claire's hair was tousled, her cheeks flushed, her body trembling. Eric looked both exhilarated and terrified. And me. I felt alive. More alive than I had in years. Claire turned to me, tears brimming in her eyes. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, I told her softly. Just know that I wanted this. That I planned it. And that I don't regret it. Eric ran a hand through his hair. Man, you're something else. I smiled faintly. You have no idea. The days after that night were strange. Claire moved through the house with a new kind of glow, her steps lighter, her eyes brighter. Eric kept his distance for a while, unsure of what came next. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Because once you open a door like that, you can't close it again. And I had no intention of closing it. This is the part where most stories would end. With regret, or jealousy, or shame. But not mine. For me, that night wasn't a loss. It was a victory. It was the proof that desire doesn't have to destroy, it can transform if you control it. I gave my wife to another man, and in doing so, I claimed a part of myself I never knew existed. And if you think that was the last time, you'd be wrong. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. Because trust me, this adventure didn't stop here. And if you want to know what happened after that night, you'll want to be here for the next confession.